My name's Karen Johnson. I'm the current clinical lead at Velindre Cancer Centre, and I'm just going to be talking this afternoon about fatigue, the communication around it, and some of the coping strategies that we use within the occupational therapy team. So the aims of the session are to explore some of the concerns that might be concerning you, to explore and discuss coping strategies, and to experience a mindfulness session. Okay. So I've also got Claire and Nell here with me this afternoon, and hopefully it will generate some discussions about how we deal with fatigue management within the OT service and some of the practical tips, hints and bits of advice that we give to patients and to their carers and families. So welcome, girls. Okay, so fatigue we know affects an individual's quality of life. It can cause physical concerns. That could be because of symptom management or issues with pain. It impacts on functional activity, so activities of daily living, our productivity, self-care and leisure. It impacts on our psychological well-being, creates social concerns, can cause issues with employment. Our spirituality, so when I talk about spirituality, I don't mean our religion, but what's really important to us as individuals. Sexuality and body image is affected. There's the obvious financial concerns. If people aren't able to return back to work, it can cause issues around that. Future plans, where suddenly everything that you had planned for, in your future, everything looks very uncertain. And family well-being, so the impact that fatigue has on your loved ones, family, friends, and the people around you. So what do we do then as OTs? So we've got a variety of coping strategies that we use. We try and teach patients how to communicate about their fatigue effectively and look after yourself. So what is fatigue? So this is a definition that we've been using for a long time now within the occupational therapy service. It's from the National Comprehensive Cancer Network of 2006. And if I just read the statement and then perhaps we'll just talk through it in a little bit more detail. So they talk about fatigue as being a distressing, persistent, subjective sense of tiredness or exhaustion related to cancer or cancer treatment that is not proportional to recent activity and it interferes with usual functioning. So I don't know what you guys have found, but certainly patients will report to me that it's distressing and persistent. They wake up, it doesn't matter whether they've technically had a good night's sleep, they're still feeling it the following day. It's very subjective, so if we had a room full of individuals and asked them all how fatigue affected them, they will all report slightly different symptoms. It's that sense of tiredness or exhaustion that's related to cancer or treatment. So we know that cancer in itself causes fatigue, but also cancer treatment, so hormone therapies, radiotherapy, side effects of drugs. And it's not proportional to recent activity, so therefore it doesn't matter if somebody's been relatively sedentary for a couple of days, they're still experiencing high levels of fatigue, and it interferes with your usual functioning. So although it's quite wordy, it's a really good one to actually use to define fatigue. So we know that cancer-related fatigue is very commonly related to cancer and its treatments. It affects 9 out of 10 patients. It can be very overwhelming, it's unpredictable, which can cause a lot of frustration. It's difficult to deal with when you're also trying to cope with a cancer diagnosis. And it prevents a person from functioning normally, which impacts on quality of life. So, how does fatigue, in your experience, have you seen patients with fatigue? How has it generally affected them?
I think for me, going back to the definition that you read out, it is that persistent feeling of being not even tired, just too exhausted to do anything. And as occupational therapists, we promote that balance of activities across different areas of life. And people will say to me, do you know, by the time I get up and have my shower, I'm just so exhausted. How can I move on then to having fun in my life? How can I do my leisure activities. You know, I used to enjoy walking the dog. I can't even like get dressed at the minute without being shattered. How can I do that? And it's that impact on quality of life.
Yeah. And some people have said to me, Karen, it feels like I'm trying to drag my legs through sticky mud. Or like it's that worst case of flu when you just have not got the energy to do absolutely anything.
And it's the activities that some people take for granted. I mean, sitting in a chair, fatigues affect you on a daily basis. Sitting in a chair can be extremely challenging. It's timing. Getting the right timing, isn't it?
Yeah, just even being able to sit out for a meal.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. Okay, and I think it's also worth mentioning that fatigue doesn't just affect people physically, but we know that mental fatigue is a huge problem for a lot of our patients, and you know, being able to concentrate on things, or sometimes they'll develop word finding difficulties the more tired they get. And that in itself then increases anxiety because patients worry, well, there must be something else wrong with me.
Do you know what I found is that patients don't always expect fatigue. So when they have their education perhaps around radiotherapy or chemotherapy, they expect that they might lose their hair. They expect that they might feel sick. But I don't think they fully expect the fatigue. They might expect to feel a bit tired by the end of the day, but they don't expect it to be all-encompassing. And then the knock-on effect that has to families who perhaps, say you typically are responsible for childcare and making the dinner, and now your partner is responsible for childcare and making the dinner, and the knock-on effect that has across families and households, it is massive.
And then when that starts happening, that increases then the individual's emotional fatigue. So people put far too much pressure on themselves, and we come on to it a little bit later on, but you know, the expectations that they should be doing things, and rather than thinking I should do it, maybe I could do it, or somebody else might be able to. So causes of fatigue, we've got the cancer itself, we know that's a cause. Cancer treatments, so surgeries, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, the hormone replacement therapies, all different types of treatments can impact. If anyone's anemic and they've got a low blood count, if people have got eating problems as a result of their treatments, that could be nausea, it could be a lack of appetite or a change in taste, pain, medication, breathlessness. And the psychological effects, so the emotional side, anxiety, depression, guilt, stress, tension, all those things. And then those difficult thoughts that people can sometimes get, you know, should, ought, they self-criticise themselves and they give themselves a hard time and blame themselves for not being able to do the things that they were doing. So the types of fatigue, we've just had a bit of a chat about it. So physical fatigue is the one that most people tend to really think about. I suppose because it impacts on those practical aspects of daily living, so trying to get up the stairs or on and off the toilet, get the shopping in, all those sorts of things. The mental fatigue and emotional fatigue, people really don't like talking about very much, because as a nation we're not very good about talking about our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. And some of it might be fear of upsetting their family and friends and their loved ones. Other parts are that maybe their family and friends just don't get it and they're just saying, come on, pull yourself together. But it goes far deeper than that, and it's much harder to actually deal with those sides of fatigue. Have you seen anyone with mental fatigue or emotional fatigue where you've thought that's the impact?
Things like people say, I love reading books, but I get halfway down the page and I forget what I've read, or you know, say rugby season, I can't concentrate on the game. I only watched the game last night and I've already forgotten what the score was, you know, that sort of thing. Not being able to follow conversation. And I think this sort of picture here is really helpful when I sort of say to patients, it all comes out of the same battery. So you have one energy supply and you're draining it just simply by being awake. You're burning calories all the time that we're awake. just through normal physiological processes, breathing and so on and so forth. We're constantly draining that battery. Adding any type of movement, no matter how simple it is, just walking to the toilet, just walking around the house, standing up to prepare your bowl of cornflakes, your battery's constantly draining.
Yeah.
And then cancer, you know, it's a terrifying illness, it's a difficult illness to deal with.
Yeah.
And if your mind is constantly thinking about the next appointment, the next scan, how am I going to tell my mom, all the different things that go through your head, you're draining all the time, that emotional fatigue, constantly draining. And I think it's actually reassuring sometimes to say that to patients, because they say, oh God, I never thought of that. I only thought about, you know, the running around, the physical side of things, and I didn't realise how much energy I'm using thinking about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Okay, so this slide here talks about what happens when an individual starts to experience fatigue. So it talks about the fact that somebody's feeling fatigued, so they rest and they do less. At that point, some people will sleep more, some people will sleep less. And because they start to become less fit and they start deconditioning, so that then leads to a reduction in muscle mass, which leads to more fatigue. And then they start to think more about their symptoms because they're feeling more fatigued. So they do less and they rest more. And quite often, family are reinforcing this cycle because families see a loved one struggling. Say, don't do that, dear, you're going to be overtired or you're going to overdo it, I'll do it for you. So they're doing less and they're resting more. So they notice then that they're feeling more fatigued when they try and be active, and that's due to them being less fit and having a reduction in muscle strength. So they do even less and they rest even more. And then they get to this point here where they sort of think, oh, it's terrible, I'm not going to get any better, I really can't cope with this. So a lot of negative thoughts coming into play. They start to feel helpless, hopeless, a low mood, frustrated, anxious. I've known of people that will sort of start lashing out at family and friends and the people that are close to them because they just don't know how to deal with this. And then after that, they all of a sudden sort of go in, they think, right, well, I'm going to do a bit more when I'm able to, and I'm going to rest more at other times because they think, well, if I do more, then I can rest more. But that actually leads to more fatigue, and it goes around in this vicious circle, and people really get trapped into this, and that's when the fatigue management comes in. How do we break this cycle, and how do we teach patients and their families and carers how to break it?
And it's a lot easier said than done, isn't it, that? Because if you're feeling fatigued and you're stuck at that point and, I don't have the energy to do anything, and the textbooks tell us that actually a little bit of activity is going to help you recharge that battery. Like the parked car on the drive that we talk about, leave it parked for months, it's gone flat. But it's so much easier to say you need to do a little bit of something than to actually get going and do that little bit. And I guess the temptation is to go whole hog and do too much.
And I think that's what we start coming on to.
My apologies.
So, well, what this slide was showing was the unhelpful thinking that goes around fatigue management. So we know that with mental fatigue, there's problems with concentration, people get easily distracted, there's issues around memory, difficulties retaining new information, forgetting how to do things that used to be automatic. So this often comes up if people are trying to get back to work. A job that they have habitually done for many, many years, suddenly they're significantly lacking in confidence about, well, can I even remember what to do? And the thoughts and feelings from the impact of cancer and fatigue on your life. So anxiety, I can't cope, I feel bad, so it must be bad. Depression, I'm useless, there's no point. Frustration, anger, it's not fair, I should be able to do this. And it all leads to negative thoughts that are really unhelpful when you're trying to do things differently. So what we try and do is look at coping statements. We try and think about, I can do this, I am strong, I can cope. And changing should to could and must to might is a really good one. So instead of saying I should wash up, I could wash up. You know, the washing is not going anywhere, so therefore if it waits another couple of hours or even another day, it's not going to hurt anyone. I must speak to my friends, or I might speak to my friends. And this is quite a tricky one because people often feel obliged to return a phone call or return a message. But actually, when they're exhausted, it's the last thing they want to do. And it's actually about teaching people that it's okay not to do it and to prioritise. And if your friends are truly your friends, they'll get it and they'll understand why. And recognising and rewarding achievements, so setting realistic goals and standards and expectations. So one of the things that we use to try and help with fatigue management and the anxiety around it is something called mindfulness. And that's where unhelpful thoughts are often the result of focusing on the future or the past. And forgetting to be at the present in this very moment in time. And it's about paying attention in a particular way. So we are on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And we try and notice what we don't normally notice. And we may not be present. Sometimes we look like we're in the room, but we're actually miles away. There's a really good, I don't know if either of you have used it, the Velindre Mindfulness app. So these, there's a selection of exercises on there, there's relaxation scripts on there, and they're really good for patients and families to be able to access. They're not sort of cancer specific, so I always signpost patients to that. So where Claire was talking about a little earlier on and I sort of stopped you, patients that are experiencing fatigue often boom and bust, so we refer to it as the boom and bust cycle. So I'll often sort of liken this to the fact that they wake up in one morning and maybe the sun is shining and they've got a whole load of things that need doing in the garden or around the house, and they go full pelt for several hours, it could be, on trying to achieve those goals. They set themselves a target and they won't stop until they've achieved it. And afterwards, we talk about sort of the ensuing days. How do they feel? And have you had anyone that's done this? And what do they normally say to you the day after? How do they feel?
Shattered.
Out of bed.
Can't get out of bed, shattered. So they've peaked, and then for the following day, sometimes it's 2 or 3 days, depending on how fatigued somebody is, can go on for days on end. And while somebody is sort of at the bottom of this cycle, it impacts on mood. They can become very irritable, very depressed, very anxious, worrying, but I must have done something, I must have injured myself, there's got to be something wrong. Gradually, their battery starts to recharge. So then there's another sunny day and they think, oh, I'll go out and I'll do that bit of fencing or garden or housework. And they keep repeating this cycle. And it has such a negative impact on them because they boom, they burst, they boom, they burst. And what we try to teach them is to actually maintain sort of on an even keel. Because life will always throw a curveball at you. You never know what's going to come along unexpectedly. And if you're constantly running on empty, then you're stuck. So we always say to people, make sure you keep 10% of your energy within yourself. So I know, Claire, you've got a nice analogy of a mobile phone, haven't you?
Yeah, so I would say to people, you know, the icon on your mobile phone, be honest, when it gets to 20, maybe even 30%, you plug it in.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, it still works at 20%. You can still make phone calls, text messages, Facebook, read the news, whatever you need to do. But you choose not to, you choose to plug it in and fully charge it. And so think of yourself as that mobile phone. Even on 20%, even when you're running out, you can still feel that you can work like absolutely fine and do everything. But think about yourself as that mobile phone. Plug yourselves in to charge sooner.
Yeah.
Don't let yourself run out.
I often use an example of filling a water bottle up and marking off sort of 20% at the base of it, because we're always being told we don't drink enough, or and I say to my patients, every time you do something, have a conversation, whether you're overthinking something, either drink something out of the bottle or water the plants, whatever you want to do with it. But as you get to that 20%, you have to stop, because that's your reserve energy.
Yeah.
And that, by doing that on a daily basis, that's what starts to stop this boom and bust cycle. So in fatigue management, we talk about the 5 Ps. So we talk about prioritisation, what has to be done, how much energy is it going to use, and what can you delegate. So this is a really nice one. I often say to people, maybe at the start of the week, have a look at what you've got planned for the week ahead. Either make a diary or a planner book or anything like that you can write things down. So Monday to Sunday, mark into the areas what has to be done. It might be hospital appointments. There might be a specific gathering with friends that's really important to you, changing the beds, all sorts of various things throughout the week. And then think about, okay, I've got 3 appointments I've got 3 things to do on a Wednesday, but the rest of the week is looking fairly empty. What can I move to a different day so that I'm expending energy equally throughout the week? And actually as well, what can be delegated? Because there might be things that you can delegate. So then planning and writing a list and thinking about what time of the day your energy levels are at their highest, because everybody is different. Some people feel better first thing in the morning. Other people find that their energy levels are actually higher sort of early on in the afternoon. So it's about keeping an energy diary and keeping tabs on that, and then actually alternating the activities that you need to do throughout the day. So an example of that would be if you know you've got an appointment first thing in the morning and you know your energy levels are not great first thing, is maybe think about having your shower the night before, so that you're not having to get up and you haven't got the pressure of trying to get through with all your personal care stuff before you get out of the house. So pacing, making sure that you actually allow enough time to get things done, and making sure you stop before you become overtired. So think about that mobile phone battery. If that red light is on, you don't want to get to that point. You need to be stopping beforehand. And making sure that you, like I said, you stop before you get overtired. Oops, we've gone. So another one there is permission. So giving yourself permission not to do something or to do it differently, and people really struggle with this one because they don't want to offend people. So if a friend turns around and says, oh, let's go, come on now, let's go for coffee, they really struggle with that. But learning to do things differently, so sitting rather than standing is a good one, with lots of kitchen tasks. There's so much you can do in sitting rather than standing.
And giving yourself permission to say that it's okay not to do it now. As you said, the example with dishes,
Yeah.
it won't hurt anyone. The dishes will be there for more hours or even the next day.
Yeah. Or even saying to a friend, if they say, let's go for coffee, well, I'd really like to, but I'm absolutely shattered. Can you come to me? Or we're going to have to do it next week. And actually that's fine to say that. And if they're good friends, they'll understand. And then the final one is physical activity. So I'm not talking about getting out jogging and getting down to the gym, but it's about remembering the hidden activity that you're doing. So taking the stairs, and I often say to people, if you feel you've been relatively sedentary and you happen to have a toilet upstairs or downstairs, then go and use the toilet upstairs rather than downstairs, and just alternating so that you're remaining physically active.
You need a little bit of physical activity to recharge the battery when it's gone flat.
Yeah, and otherwise you end up losing your muscle mass and everything becomes much harder. So coping with fatigue, we need to understand our energy limits and actually stick to them, and everybody's different. Making sure that you balance the day between rest and activity. Alternate activity types throughout the day. energy diaries are a really good way of doing this, and I know within our service we've got specific diaries we use that are colour coded, and they're very visual, and that really helps people to do that.
And for people watching this video, I wonder if they could access the Macmillan website and ask for a Macmillan fatigue booklet to be sent out to them in
the
the post.
Macmillan fatigue book is really good. I'm trying to think what other literature we use.
There's energy diary in the back.
Yeah, there's energy diaries.
But later have the top tips.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
There's top tips that we have, and also Macmillan do a moving forward physical activity book, which actually sort of guides people to becoming more physically active. So that's another good resource to look at. We know that relaxation techniques can help, and like I sort of said a bit earlier, the mindfulness, the Velindre Mindfulness and Relaxation app is a brilliant source for that. Sleep hygiene, so making sure that if somebody's sleep is disturbed, it's about exploring why.
Yeah.
So for some individuals, they will wake up in the night because they need to go to the bathroom, or they might be having hot flushes or pain. And at some point, if you're having broken night's sleep and there's sort of a medical reason for it that can't be resolved, at certain points you're going to need to top up and restore. What we don't want to happen is if individuals are waking in the night or having difficulty getting off to sleep because there's lots of worrying, sort of ruminating thoughts going around in their mind, that's the time when we don't want those individuals catnapping in the daytime, because they very quickly get into very poor sleep patterns. So it's about addressing the issue behind why are they waking. Sometimes you can't change the cause, like I said, some of the physical causes, but the worrying thoughts, some of the anxiety and things, you know, writing worrying thoughts down as they come up. It might even be flitting things like I need to remember to pay a bill or anything like that that's playing on your mind, trying to transfer it onto paper. Doing things differently and delegating where possible. So Claire, you've mentioned a little bit about car batteries. So we often say within fatigue management that if you think about a car, if you park that car up on a driveway for a month and didn't move it, what happens when you go and try and start the engine? And of course the battery is completely flat. And that's what we want to try and get people to think about who are experiencing fatigue, is that quite often they or their family friends will say, don't do it, don't overdo it, we don't want you to get more tired. But it actually has a negative impact on them, because the less they're doing, the less they're going to be able to do. And then if you think of that flat car battery, in order to actually get the car to get running again, you have to give it a huge surge of energy and then take it on quite a long drive to be able to get it operational. We know that when you've had cancer and cancer treatments, your battery, your sort of battery of energy is smaller than what it was pre-cancer. So it's about learning to adjust within those new energy limits and establish really a way forward. We also know that sleep is affected by the cancer treatments that people have. So therefore, whereas for you or I, sleep is restorative, for somebody that's been subjected to cancer treatments, the sleep that they get isn't as restorative. So therefore, even though partners may say, but you've been asleep all night, it's not had that same restorative nature. Do you want to pause it? Okay, so thanks for listening. Hope you found the session informative. You can find further information about fatigue and some of the other interventions that we use with it on the therapies page of the Velindre Cancer Centre website. This presentation will also hopefully be available on there shortly. There's also information on there for you to be signposted regarding the dietetics input for fatigue management, along with physiotherapy and physical activity. Thank you very much.